Sonic Unleashed is an oddball. It was the first main game released after the disaster that was Sonic 06. It was the first game to introduce the boost gameplay that still defines modern Sonic gameplay today. Its story was a standalone story that contrasted with Sonic 06 as being much more lighthearted than its predecessor, a buddy globe-trotting adventure with an ending whose implications are so bittersweet, it's almost painful. Sonic Unleashed, on the surface, seems to have the makings for a game worthy of being responsible for rehabilitating Sonic's image and reputation. As we all know, that didn't happen. When Sonic Unleashed was first released, I don't actually remember if I was there for it, but when I finally got my copy of it for the Wii, I remember liking it a lot. Aside from the immense difficulty I had back in the day with the Dark Gaia boss fight and the Eggman Land level at the end, I rather enjoyed my experience with the game and left it with a fairly positive opinion. So you can imagine how surprised I was when, years later, I saw so many prominent voices in the YouTube gaming space, placing Sonic Unleashed alongside Sonic 06 as being part of the Sonic Dark Age. It was specifically the comparison video by YouTube channel Exo Paradigm Gamer that made me realize that the version of Sonic Unleashed I knew was actually a different version than what many others were playing, specifically on Xbox 360. Ever since then, I've developed a growing urge not only to try out the next-gen version, but to go back for the first time in over a decade to the Wii version and experience the differences between the two. After a lot of searching, some luck, and overpaying for a PS3 copy of the game, I was able to play both versions of the game in relatively close proximity, and I came away amazed just how different these games really were. I don't know if it would be fair to attribute my relative ease with finishing the Wii version of Sonic Unleashed to familiarity. It has been over a decade since I played through the game's story. I don't remember the last time I touched the game at all, actually. There's no particular reason why I haven't touched the game at all in so long, but when I revisited it, I was definitely met with a certain learning curve since, in the intervening years since last playing the game, I had played through a number of other Boost Sonic games which have tweaked and amended the gameplay and the controls. Going back wasn't a jarring experience, but there was an element of unlearning required of me, which, after a little bit of practice in the opening stages, was pretty simple to get readjusted to. Sonic Unleashed on the Wii is quite impressive considering the concessions that were made to get the game to work on Nintendo's much maligned motion-controlled console. The Boost gameplay has been preserved, but it has a bit of a twist. I'm not going to pretend like I know the reason why a continuous boost like what is featured in the next-gen version of the game isn't included in the Wii version, but replaying this version, I found myself really enjoying how the developers translated this gameplay mechanic to the Wii. You start every level with 3 boost cells, which represent 1 boost each. You collect rings and perform combos to fill those cells, and you can level up and add cells through your playthrough of a level to give yourself more boosts, which will help you travel through the levels faster. The Boost gameplay has a number of detractors who argue that Boost removes the challenge from Sonic levels because you can accelerate Sonic to his top speed instantly even after a mistake, which results in someone potentially being able to brute force their way through levels and never really get good at them. While I'm not here to necessarily add anything to this argument, I will say that as far as the Wii version goes, because your boost gauge is divided into separate cells, which you earn more of the better you are at the levels, adds to the counter-argument that the boost is something the player earns through skill. You already have to be good at the level in order to get the boost. It's what I like about the Wii version especially. You can run through levels over and over and find the best times to use each boost to make the most of their benefits. This is part of what makes these levels fun. The levels will also frequently switch their perspective to play in a 2D one, and I found that I really liked these segments. Aside from the automated sections, which do provide some exciting if sometimes pace-breaking spectacle, the multiple pathways that reward good timing and fast reactions make for an extremely fun and satisfying experience. Looking at this in retrospect, I can kind of see how these 2D sections would see a comeback in Sonic Colors a couple of years later. The ranking system makes its much expected return in Sonic Unleashed. For the daytime stages in the Wii version, your rank is wholly dependent on how quickly you finish each stage. The simplicity of this particular design, as we'll see later, is one of the strongest reasons why I believe that the Wii version of Sonic Unleashed is the better experience. I've already given away my conclusion about the two, but I still want to talk about a part of the Wii version of the game that not many people talk about often. The Werehog levels are easily the main reason why people detract so much from this game. Why play a Sonic game where you can't go fast? Why play a Sonic game that focuses on beat-em-up gameplay? What's the point? This isn't Sonic. I know that's a bit of an oversimplification of the arguments offered by people who reject the Werehog levels, but that was certainly my knee-jerk reaction to the Werehog levels when I first played it back as a middle school kid. The Wii version in particular is best known as having a higher proportion of Werehog levels to daytime levels compared to the next-gen version of the game, though I have a counter-argument for that which I'll share later. But now, as an adult who has a lot more diverse gaming experience than what I did as a kid, I found that I enjoyed the Werehog levels just as much as the daytime levels, just in a different way. The fun of the Werehog levels for me comes specifically from the level design and the act of platforming. I really found myself enjoying the platforming in these levels. The way Sonic Team continually arranged these levels and how you interacted with them with Sonic's stretchy arms made certain platforming challenges really fun to figure out and or navigate, especially in the later levels. This goes for both versions, but I have a preference for the Wii version, although that isn't to say it's perfect, but I'll save the comparison for later. I prefer to play the Wii Sonic Unleashed with the GameCube controller. For me, the control layout with the GameCube controller is the most intuitive, especially with the Werehog levels. The left and right triggers represent Sonic's left and right arms respectively, and inputting the various right-left jump combinations make for an interesting take on the brawler genre. There is a leveling up system for the Werehog levels, and it is based on the amount of Dark Gaia energy you collect in the levels by destroying things and taking out enemies. The more you collect, the more moves and upgrades you unlock. On the Wii version, these moves and upgrades are in a preset order, so you don't really have to think at all about how Sonic levels up. For a kid with no patience for RPGs and character leveling systems, this was a godsend back in the day. Now, I still don't mind. There's a little more thought that goes into the manual leveling up system present in the next-gen version of the game, but ultimately the difference in the light RPG elements between the next-gen and the Wii version of the game didn't change the way I played the game in any significant, discernible way. The main problem I, and many others, had with the Werehog levels on the Wii version of Sonic Unleashed is the movement. It's something that everyone notices, especially in tight areas where you find yourself accidentally dashing straight off a cliff. Movement in general can sometimes feel surprisingly janky, and while struggling through the tune-on levels, I realized what it is. It is such a strange flaw, I wonder why Sonic Team decided to program Sonic to move this way. Sonic in his Werehog form does not have analog movement. Sonic instead moves like a car with a 2-speed automatic transmission with an additional overdrive gear. From a stop, moving the analog stick will start Sonic moving, at first at his slowest speed. After a second or two, Sonic will then automatically upshift, so to speak, and move to his top default speed. Letting go of the analog stick and quickly moving it forward will shift Sonic into his dash, which is his highest achievable speed in his Werehog form. The obvious problem here is that slow movement is not possible to maintain. Everything we've grown to understand about analog movement in a 3D space ever since Super Mario 64 12 years prior to the release of this game betrays us. If we are in a tight section, we want to move slowly, carefully, deliberately. We edge the analog stick slightly forward or in whatever direction, and we assume the character's speed will reflect that slight movement. But Sonic in Sonic Unleashed for Wii will, no matter what you do, increase his speed automatically. As a reaction to this, we, the players, assume it is our error and we go to correct it by pulling back the analog stick and then moving it slightly forward to get our intended speed from Sonic. But this proves to be an even bigger error, and we are instead met with Sonic shifting into a mad dash straight off a cliff to his death. The next-gen version of Sonic Unleashed features full analog movement, and while I'm sure there was probably some kind of engine limitation that prevented its implementation, it is one aspect of the Werehog levels in Wii Sonic Unleashed that negatively affects the playability of the Werehog levels. It leads to so many unearned deaths and never stopped being frustrating from when I first played it as a kid. I also have to question the lives system in the Wii version of Sonic Unleashed. No matter what, you start every level with a fixed number of lives. The number of lives you finish with resets to its default number when you enter a different stage. It raises questions about the purpose of the lives system in the first place. Getting a game over simply boots you to the start screen, but your progress is still saved aside from having to restart the level from the beginning. What's the point? Perhaps it's simply out of a sense of tradition? It's not a giant flaw, but it adds an unnecessary level of tedium that isn't any more punishment than an annoyance. Not that you're likely to see the game over screen anyway, but that's beside the point. I live in Japan. Xbox has never been especially popular in Japan, and thus the only truly accessible way to play Sonic Unleashed is to play it on PlayStation 3. I guess I could have gone out of my way to find an Xbox 360 and a corresponding version of Sonic Unleashed specifically for this purpose, but I already have a PS3. Sonic games are already expensive in Japan thanks to Sonic not being as popular and, by extension, harder to find in the wild, and my console collection has outgrown the space in my apartment as it is without having to get an additional console just for one game. Yes, I understand that I was buying into an inferior version of Sonic Unleashed by getting the PS3 version, and those performance issues did not color my final opinion of the next-gen version of Sonic Unleashed. I just want to get that out of the way now so that I can make it clear that the problems I have with this HD version of Sonic Unleashed can't be fixed by making it run at a locked 60 frames per second. There are plenty of other issues this game has which exist independently of whether it runs at a stable frame rate or not. Sonic Unleashed HD compared to its Wii counterpart looks definitely more next-gen. The lighting is a lot more robust. There's greater detail both in the textures and the level geometry. The characters have higher polygon counts, and we see the return of a similar physics engine that was implemented in Sonic 06 on all destructible objects in the game. As a next-gen 2008 Sonic game, I feel as though this could hang with some of the best of the AAA console games of the day as far as graphics go, and even now, many voices out there say that Sonic Unleashed still stands as the best-looking 3D Sonic game in the entire franchise. But here's the thing. I remember back when watching Some Call Me Johnny's review of Sonic Unleashed for Xbox 360 and seeing Sonic grind down the clock tower on Rooftop Run and being blown away by the visuals. Since I only ever played the Wii game where that section was a 2D section, the HD version's visuals were always a huge draw for me. But after having played the game, I feel as though some of these next-gen graphical features serve somewhat to the detriment of gameplay at times. One of the biggest issues I had with the Werehog levels in particular were the non-adjustable camera angles that sometimes negatively affect depth perception. This is especially exacerbated in situations where you are required to navigate challenges that require precision. The Wii version has a very useful remedy for this problem, and that is through giving Sonic a simple drop shadow. That, alongside Sonic's generously floaty jump, allows the player an assured way to avoid over or undershooting their jumps. The HD version does have a drop shadow, but since it is more realistic thanks to the more advanced next-gen lighting, judging these jumps is a lot more difficult, and while it didn't happen too often, there were occasions where I jumped into the void thinking I was definitely clear of the gap. At the very least, I would have appreciated a means to adjust my camera angle, but it was annoying to find that in many of these sections, they were parts of the levels that locked the camera in place. Another issue I ran into in the later Werehog levels of Sonic Unleashed HD were the tightrope sections. It wasn't the advent of these challenges themselves, but rather the way the camera behaves in these sections. Particularly in the Empire City levels, where the platforms would collapse beneath you, the camera really negatively impacts their playability. For those who might not know, these sections require Sonic to balance on narrow beams high above bottomless pits. Many of these challenges require the player to carefully negotiate 90-degree turns. Early in the game, these aren't really that bad, but in Empire City, you encounter beams that, once your drop shadow hits them, they become unstable and collapse. I say drop shadow because even if you jump to give yourself a means to extend your timing to leave the beam will start to collapse as Sonic is airborne above them. You have a certain amount of time to cross that beam before it falls and takes Sonic with it. This timing element is actually pretty fun. I think this is a cool way to expand on the tightrope idea. And even coming to a 90-degree turn on these collapsing beams is a fun challenge. But these challenges are rendered much less playable when you are on a timer, you come to a corner, and you try to turn the corner. Just as you do, the camera veers to a dramatically different angle, unnecessarily changing the angle of your input very quickly, and suddenly forcing Sonic to walk straight off the beam into the pits to an instant death. There is no way to recover from falling off the beam because on the sides of these beams are spikes, which, if Sonic touches, prevents him from jumping because of knockback. The number of unearned deaths I suffered in this section of Empire City are countless, and the fact that this challenge on the face of it isn't actually that difficult makes every death I suffered increasingly frustrating. On a positive note, I really liked the combat. I know the combat isn't as in-depth as some other games in the same genre. Coming from Yakuza 1 for PlayStation 2, which was released in 2005, to Sonic Unleashed, where both games have beat-em-up style gameplay, it almost felt as though I didn't change games. The RPG style progression system, even, is very similar to Yakuza. Sonic Unleashed has a much faster means of progression, mind you, but I did find the similarities between these two very different Sega franchises humorous, but also ingenious. The combat in Sonic Unleashed HD plays more like a conventional beat-em-up game, using the face buttons pressed in quick succession to trigger different fighting combos, similar to fighting games. There isn't much in the way of enemy variety, although there is greater variety in the HD version than the Wii version. You will still be fighting a lot of the same enemies and even the same combination of enemies through all of the levels. The combat mostly takes place in locked-off arenas that halt your progression until you defeat all the enemies. Where the Werehog levels between the HD and Wii versions diverge is there is a kind of hyper mode gauge that fills while you collect Dark Gaia energy. When you activate hyper mode, Sonic will move faster, hit faster and harder while the gauge gradually depletes. There is no way to manually disengage this mode, which I wish you could to save your Dark Gaia energy, but in the later parts of the game, this hyper mode can help immensely with the mini-bosses that occasionally pop up in certain levels. One great quality of life improvement over the Wii version is that the HD version not only has real analog control, but also has a dedicated run button for the dash. This is much more intuitive, and I am extremely grateful that Sonic Team made this particular decision. Sonic's daytime levels don't really necessitate explanation, since this is the genesis of the boost gameplay formula, which is still prevalent as of Sonic Frontiers. Even as someone who grew up with the adventure-style gameplay, I found a lot to like about the boost gameplay. Sega were always a publisher who focused on arcade-style gameplay, giving the incentive to the player to replay the same levels over and over to the point of a level of mastery to achieve the highest possible rank. It requires memorization, good timing, and quick thinking to do. And that's the fun of the challenge presented in the boost levels. They remind me the most of the 2D Sonic games in that regard, much more than the gameplay of the adventure style, though those games are their own brand of fun that I also find great enjoyment in. The boost is earned, and the ability to continue to skillfully navigate the levels with the boost firing continuously takes more skill than I think the boost to win folks make it out to be. Maybe I'm wrong here, but even when I first ever touched the Wii version of the game, I thought that this was the next logical step for Sonic gameplay. There were some occasions when I would boost when I would try to do a homing attack, which is a common issue thanks to the fact that the homing attack and the boost are mapped to the same button. But that issue isn't a big one, or the big one. HD Sonic Unleashed features hub worlds. Every continent has its own thematically distinct hub world. These hub worlds feel a little superfluous. They are very small and you don't spend much time in them. When you need to talk to villagers to progress the story, it's just a matter of talking to everyone until someone pushes the story further. Since there are only ever a handful of villagers per hub world, it almost feels like simply another layer of something separating you from the actual gameplay. The design of the human characters is really good, definitely memorable, but There wasn't much else about them beyond their design that I could really praise. I have difficulty finding a justification for the hub worlds and their characters aside from the fact that PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 are more capable consoles, and there needs to be some feature to set them apart to show the benefits of their more advanced technology. I don't have anything against hub worlds in principle. I always liked exploring around the hub worlds in Sonic Adventure and watching the way they transform and evolve as the story progresses. They are actually quite dynamic, and I really like them, even if they might not appear so robust these days. Sonic Unleashed HD's hub worlds aren't all that impressive in comparison, and Sonic's limited control in these hub worlds makes exploring them more of a chore than anything else because they aren't really that big or dynamic. There's little reason aside from collecting the Sun and Moon medallions to even bother exploring them. The hub worlds open themselves up to sections where you can choose the levels you can go to. These other sections within the hub worlds are beyond the Gaia gates, and this is where Sonic's daytime control opens up. This is sometimes okay and sometimes obnoxious. Sonic weighs a literal ton in the daytime levels. It makes sense since this is part of how momentum works. Within the linear context of the daytime stages, this is fine, but in the open-ended design of these small hub world sections, it is rough. The Werehog versions of these worlds are fine since Werehog Sonic is much more agile than daytime Sonic, and precision platforming is much more important for Sonic the Werehog. It's perfectly serviceable. But regular Sonic, if you're not careful, can careen to his death or fly off into a far corner of the map if you accidentally boost when you're meant to homing attack or light dash, for example. Speaking of these maps, it reminds me of one gripe I have about Sonic in HD Sonic Unleashed I didn't know about before playing it. Similar to the adventure games, you have to unlock Sonic's full move set via adventure-style level-up items. This isn't the biggest problem ever, but I don't really understand the point of it here. The Wii version of Sonic Unleashed has Sonic's entire range of movement at your disposal immediately, but in the HD version, I do wonder what the point is of not having that full range of movement. To tutorialize it in the hub worlds, perhaps, but the missions in the Wii version were more than sufficient for teaching the player how to use these new moves. I guess it's a way to further legitimize the existence of hub worlds in the HD version, but the experience of coming from the Wii version with a fully capable Sonic from the beginning to the HD version with a nerfed Sonic from the beginning, it almost makes your initial runs of the first few levels early in the game before Sonic is fully equipped feel like the game is incomplete somehow. Not necessarily to the extent that you see in Sonic and the Secret Rings, nowhere near that, but another feature the HD version of Sonic Unleashed has that the Wii version doesn't is it has Sky Chase-like levels. It has two of them specifically. The first one when you are traveling to Spagonia for the first time, and the second when you're flying to Eggman Land. These are aesthetically reminiscent of the Sky Chase levels in Sonic Adventure, but they are exclusively QuickTime events this time. Sonic Unleashed, both versions, are full of QTEs. In principle, I don't think there's anything objectionable with QTEs in games. I can see how there can be issues with games having an over-reliance on QTEs in place of gameplay, but I don't think they are inherently bad. I don't think Sonic Unleashed relies too much on QTEs. However, I don't understand why these flying sections were included. Not that I'm against there being more content in my games, but the fact that there are only 2 of these sections in this game when you are hopping between continents constantly via the same airplane, it almost gives the feeling that these sections were tacked on. The argument could be made that it matches up with Eggman's part of the story, but something just feels amiss when there is a whole gameplay style that sees so little development. This is especially the case when it adds so little to the game that I didn't even really notice it was completely omitted from the Wii version. It feels a little like filler in the grand scheme of things. After playing through the next-gen version of Sonic Unleashed in close proximity to the Wii version, I came to understand why so many felt as though Sonic Unleashed ought to be included alongside Sonic 06, Sonic and the Secret Rings, and Sonic the Hedgehog GBA as part of the Dark Age. I've had my fair share of criticisms of this game, this in reference to Sonic Unleashed HD, and I've praised it for a number of its different aspects that gave it certain gameplay advantages over its Wii counterpart. And despite this particular version for PlayStation 3 having some rough performance issues despite its delayed release compared to its Xbox and Wii counterparts, nothing could really prepare me for the questions the HD version of Sonic Unleashed would have me asking it that would carry implications about the purpose for its existence. Let's talk about the story progression between the Wii and HD versions of Sonic Unleashed. Across both versions, Sonic must collect a certain number of Sun and Moon medallions in order to unlock a Gaia Gates, where he can then collect keys to unlock the Gaia Temples to re-energize the Chaos Emeralds and lower the world's continents back into place. If you don't reach a minimum threshold of these medallions, you are required to go back to past stages to get the medallions necessary to move the story along. The way these medallions are procured differs between the Wii and HD versions. In the Wii version, you will receive up to 3 medallions depending on your rank at the end of a stage. An S rank will net you 3, an A rank 2, and a B rank 1. Anything lower than that, you are allowed to finish the stage, but you don't receive any medallions necessitating you to replay the stage to get a higher rank. The way these ranks are achieved differ between the day and night stages. The day stages rank you solely on how quickly you can finish each stage. If you finish within a certain time, which is clearly displayed while you play through the stage and notifies you with a sound effect every time you fall below the rank's threshold of a lower rank, you will be ranked accordingly. For the Werehog stages, your rank is based on 3 different parameters: the amount of time you took to complete the stage, the amount of dark Gaia energy you collect meeting or exceeding the minimum threshold, and the number of rings you collected within the stage. Each of these awards you their own corresponding medallion. The Wii version of Sonic Unleashed also includes missions that are sometimes tasks to perform within a level, similar to the additional challenges that can be found in Sonic Adventure 2, like collecting a certain number of rings or destroying a certain number of enemies within a certain time frame, etc. And in other cases, especially in the night stages where you complete tutorials. As long as you complete these missions and you do well in the stages, you will probably never run into the issue of not having enough medallions to progress the story. In the HD Sonic Unleashed, the medallion procurement is the same across both day and night stages, as well as the hub worlds. There are a certain number of Sun and Moon medallions throughout the stages that you have to find. This requires a certain level of exploration that is conducive to the hub worlds, the Gaia gates, and nighttime levels. But the daytime levels, not so much. This might not sound like a huge deal, and in the first half of the game you don't really notice it. You figure getting 6 or 7 out of 10 medallions in Werehog levels is enough to compensate for missing most or all the medallions in the daytime levels until you hit the wall and see Chip coming up to you and saying you need 22 medallions to unlock the next stage. Okay, no big deal, just find 22 more medallions. It sounds simple, and it really is. The problem isn't entirely in the act of having to go back and collect these medallions, although it would be nice to have some kind of indication of how many medallions I need in order to move things forward rather than having to constantly check by entering the hub worlds. The problem lies in the fact that I found myself replaying the nighttime levels and scouring them for medallions. A lot of people like to say the benefit of Sonic Unleashed HD over the Wii version is that there is a better ratio of daytime to nighttime levels, where it is more equal than the Wii version, where there are definitely more nighttime levels than daytime levels. But after having to go back and hunt for an additional couple of hours to collect medallions I missed in the nighttime levels in the HD version, I'm pretty confident when I say that I spent more time as Sonic the Werehog in Sonic Unleashed HD than I did in Sonic Unleashed Wii. Okay, so what? By the end of the game, the final stages playing through Adabat, I found myself asking while blasting through a portion of the level that was a clear reference to Panzer Dragoon, what's the point of playing these levels? The gameplay design of the boost levels is meant to incentivize going through the levels as quickly and as stylishly as possible. But if you want to progress the story, you have to collect the medallions, which, unless you run into them by accident, you're probably not going to be able to see because of how fast you're moving. You could slow down and attempt to crawl your way through the level to try to find the medallions, but then that's completely contrary to the purpose of the gameplay style. The whole progression is totally counterintuitive. Even if you take the fastest path through the daytime levels, you're still likely to miss the medallions as much as if you were to take the slowest path. You're still ranked at the end, but the rank is meaningless towards progression. Sure, it's great for helping to test your mastery of the levels, but if your goal is to try to finish the game, it's entirely meaningless how well you do in a stage. Why are the daytime levels even in this game? What is the point of pointing out that there are more daytime levels in Sonic Unleashed HD as a benefit when the likeliness of their benefiting your progression through the game is dubious at best? I would rather have more nighttime levels if it means there is more wiggle room for the number of medallions I can collect or miss in each stage. I almost feel as though the added content in the additional continents and daytime stages of Sonic Unleashed HD are to the game's detriment than its benefit. And by the end of my playthrough of the HD version, I came away feeling that this game would be better if it either implemented the medallion system of the Wii version or dropped the daytime stages entirely. A bold statement, I'm sure, but again, what's the point? Because it's Sonic, I guess? When I first heard Sonic Unleashed received mixed critical and audience reactions, I was very surprised. As having only played the Wii version at the time, the only reasons why that would be that I could think of were because of the graphics and the final boss fight, which felt a little cheap. But was that reason for such a middling score? Then I realized the versions were different between the Wii and PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and I can't believe that despite the unearned amount of hate Sonic games receive in the modern game reviewing landscape by reviewers who clearly never liked Sonic anyway, I have to say, I have to agree with this consensus. Sonic Unleashed is a fine game. The Wii version offers the best experience. But after finishing the HD version, I was content with the idea that after ejecting the disc from my PlayStation 3, that it would probably be years before I would decide to revisit it. Despite its potential replay value, I just can't be bothered. I had my fill, and that is the biggest disappointment a Sonic game has ever been to me.